So today we're going to be playing with an old favorite of mine, and this is an Abzan whip deck. So I've been messing around with various mid-range green decks. They basically all contain Den Protector and Death Mist Raptor, and I've been trying to find the deck that I like the best. And last week I played the Bant Megamorph deck at the SCG Open in Portland and hated the deck. Absolutely hated it. Been messing around with Sultai Reanimator and played that in the SSL, did okay. I've been playing it since then, I've been doing pretty well. And now I want to try Abzan. So the reason I want to try Abzan is not because of Siege Rhino. Siege Rhino is great, it is awesome. As far as this deck is concerned, in the main deck, Sidisi is almost certainly a better 4-drop, but Abzan offers you a lot of things for the sideboard. So we have things like Elspeth, and this card is insane in the Death Mist Raptor mirrors, and I think it's overall just like the best card that you can have because it's so difficult for them to deal with. Hornet Queen also kind of counts for that, which is, you know, why we're trying to whip people, but they can still beat this by having a bunch of Death Mist Raptors, maybe some big Den Protectors, some monstrous Fleece Mane Lions and whatnot. Like, Hornet Queen is beatable, it is just very, very difficult. So post board we have Elspeth, which is the #1. Fleece Mane Lion also helps there, and it is also a pretty reasonable thing to bring in against control and things like you know, Atarka Red, any sort of red aggro deck. And then we also have some Dromoka's commands, which are sort of replaceable actually, but these end up being really good alongside Den Protector, not only because you can recur them, but just putting a counter on Den Protector, then it's 4 power, very few things can block it, and you can actually just kill your opponent that way, which is pretty nice. But it's also a card that you can board in against the Atarka Red decks and have it be very relevant. So I like this card a lot, and it could be something like a Reclamation Sage in the Sultai Reanimator decks, for example, but Dromoka's Command, pound for pound, is just a better card. So that's where my white mana is coming from. That's what I like. Other than that, green-black stuff is generally pretty good. I like this shell a lot in the format, where you have Satyr Wayfinder to help you hit your land drops and to put things in the graveyard, some Sylvan Caryatids to accelerate your mana and fix it, the Den Protector Death Mist Raptor combo, which is very good basically no matter what deck you're playing, but also awesome when you're milling yourself as well, because you can put some Death Mist Raptors in the graveyard, and the milling is kind of like tutoring, where like if you play a Satyr Wayfinder and maybe a Commune with the Gods or something while you have a Den Protector in your hand, you are more likely to be able to pick up the card that you actually need. So say you're searching for a Whip of Erebos or something, and you just mill over 10 cards, and if you hit it and you have a Den Protector, well, you just found it. So it's pretty cool. This deck often has access to a lot of its own deck, just because, you know, like, your graveyard is an extension of your hand while you have stuff like Den Protector. And then other than that, we have Smear's Downfalls and Murderous Cuts for removal. Some people play more Murderous Cuts in this deck, but I don't really like that because you're not milling yourself that hard. Like, when you have Sidisi and Satyr Wayfinder, it's fine. Like, you can play up to 4 of this card if you really wanted to, because Sidisi puts cards in your graveyard over and over and over again. But this deck does not have that luxury. It's normally just like a one-shot and done, and it's not like we're trading with our opponent super early, you know? We're not making a bunch of one-for-one trades outside of things like Thoughtseize. So I think the first Delve card is pretty much free. You can basically guarantee that it is going to be fairly cheap, and you're probably going to get to play Murderous Cut for only 1 mana. But the second one is probably going to be like pretty close to full cost, you know, if not even just the full amount. But I do like having some of those, you know, like there are a lot of turns where it would be like, you know, if I could just play 2 spells, I'd be able to like turn that corner and get ahead. You know, you get to play something like Siege Rhino, also have a mana open to kill their Stormbreath Dragon, and then from there you're in the driver's seat. And Murderous Cut lets you do that, but it doesn't let you do that when you have a bunch of these. So 2 is good. Maybe you could play a 3rd if you want to be pretty greedy, but I would not be playing 4 in this archetype at all. And then we have 4 Coursers. That's pretty standard in these decks, although I'm becoming less and less impressed with Courser as I play against more and more Dromoka's Command decks. So it's kind of tough to justify cutting Courser in your Whip of Erebos deck just because they're going to have Dromoka's command, because if your linchpin is Whip of Erebos, that also dies to command. So Courser also kind of helps in the regard that it protects your whip from an edict effect. So you do want some other enchantments in your whip deck, I think, and Courser is certainly a very, very good card. It's just a matter of how much of a beatdown you can take when they cast Dromoka's command. And most of the decks that have Dromoka's command also have Den Protector, so then you're basically guaranteed that like your first 2 Coursers are just going to die almost for free, which kind of stinks, but the card is good enough that you should almost certainly still be playing it. And then at our top end, we have a Soul of Innistrad, which is a card I really like in these self-mill decks, because eventually you're going to mill this thing over against a control deck, or even just like some grindy matchup where it goes long, you know, maybe some sort of Abzan deck or what have you. But this is the thing that allows you to just keep milling yourself with Satyr Wayfinder, and eventually you'll find action, which is pretty nice. And since Dragons of Tarkir came out, it's even better because you get to return stuff like Den Protectors. So you just kind of go off where you activate Soul, get back a Den Protector or 2, and then maybe you can Den Protector your whip, bring back all your Death Mist Raptors, and then suddenly you just have so much action to work with. So I really like the Soul a lot, and if I had more self-mill stuff or maybe a discard outlet, I would consider playing a second one. So there are, you know, like the Sidisi decks, I've considered playing a second one in the board, and, you know, maybe you're playing like a Jund whip deck with stuff like Kolagon's command. Like, you could also consider something like Tormenting Voice in that deck to get another Soul in there, but might be going a little too deep. And then, yeah, the very, very top end, we have the Hornet Queen, which is just so very good against all these green decks. You do need a way to kill their Den Protectors, because Den Protector actually gets around Hornet Queen pretty well. So Hornet Queen is not the be-all, end-all, but is still very, very good. That's about it. You know, three discard spells, which is pretty normal, I think, for this archetype. You don't want to flood on them. You just want to trade 1-for-1 pretty cheaply in the early game and kind of figure out what they're up to. So you can sculpt your game plan around that. And then the mana base is pretty standard. I don't think I've changed this too much since I've been playing this deck. I would really like a second Urborg, although that is difficult when I need white mana in the post-war games for things like Elspeth and Fleecemane Lion. So I need either double white or white fairly early. So I can't really cut a white source for a black source. Plus I have additional GG cards in Death Mist Raptor, so I need double green pretty early on as well. So I think the second Urborg is the concession, but Urborg is really one of the best lands in the deck when you have things like Hero's Downfall and Whip of Erebos in your deck, just because, you know, sometimes you get to 8 mana and you don't even have 4 black, which, you know, it doesn't sound that crazy. You have a bunch of Windswept Heaths and everything going on here, but sometimes, you know, you do have 4 black, but 2 of it's pain lands, and then you have to take like 2 damage to activate your Whip of Erebos on curve, and that's not very fun either. So I like the second the second Urborg to kind of fix the mana for all that stuff, but concessions had to be made. So for the rest of the sideboard, we have 2 Duress, which are additional Thoughtseizes against control decks, but also double as things that you can bring in against the aggressive decks. And I shouldn't have these foil ones. I should have swapped these out for Dragons of Tarkir ones, but forgot to do that. But yeah, these are good against mono red. A couple self-inflicted wounds. You can bring these in against Ojutai decks, as long as you know that they have a bunch of Ojutais and not like 2 or something. But if they have 3 or more, I don't mind bringing in 2 self-inflicted wounds and cutting most of the other removal. But these are mostly there for Abzan aggro, which is kind of a tough matchup. You know, you need to slow them down a little bit, and there are spots where you can get into racing situations thanks to things like Den Protector, Death Mist Raptor, Siege Rhino, where the life loss actually matters, and it's a cheap card to return with Den Protector, which is pretty nice. We have a couple Bile Blights, which are mainly for the red aggressive decks, but also double as a thing that you can bring in against Abzan aggro. And then we have a couple Bitter Revelations. Hello. Look at that card. If you guys follow me at all, you know that I like Read the Bones a lot, and I play a lot of Read the Bones in a lot of my green-black sideboards, and it's basically the best card against control because it allows you to stay on top of them. So, you know, you just keep chaining those together. But for this one, I don't have like 3 or 4 Read the Bones. I only have the 2 Bitter Revelations, and I wanted to try these alongside Death Mist Raptor because I think it's pretty good, and the extra mana isn't that big of a deal. It might be actually because of Silumgar's Scorn if they don't have a dragon, but for the most part, you're going to have a bunch of dead mana against the control decks because either you're pacing yourself or you have a lot of reactive cards, or like, you know, you're trying to set up a turn where you can like play a discard spell and a Whip of Erebos, so you're kind of like sandbagging a bunch of stuff. So there are definitely turns where mana goes unspent, so I don't actually mind the slightly more expensive Bitter Revelation there. But I think the upside is high enough to justify it. Just being able to put actual cards into your graveyard instead of scrying, I think is pretty nice. The lines we talked about, Heroic Expanse we talked about, and then why the hell is there a land in my sideboard? It's because against control decks you take out Caryatids, because they're bad against sweepers, they're bad against matchups where the games go long, so you don't really want them in your deck anymore. So I want an extra land to board in instead of those things to compensate. So we go up to 25 land, which I think is pretty normal for a deck with no acceleration. And it's also a black and white source, which are your off colors, and you're bringing in some weirdo stuff, you know, some Fleecemane Lions and some earlier black cards. So I think the white-black duel is just best. So that's about it. I have high hopes for this deck. Maybe not this exact build, but I do think that somewhere in this neighborhood is where a good deck is. So hopefully we can try and figure that out.